Welcome. I'd really appreciate if you could drop a comment with your thoughts and reactions as you listen. Your feedback helps me craft better stories for you. The illuminated screen offered her only solace in the cold night. Diana scrolled endlessly through photos from happier times before her world fell apart again. In each image, she searched her ex, boyfriend Tom's face for clues, trying to find proof of his renewed betrayal. Then she found it, a tagged photo that wasn't hers. Tom smiled widely next to an attractive blonde woman, their arms wrapped around each other on a sunny beach. Diana's blood ran cold as she enlarged the picture. She recognized the location. It was where she and Tom had vacationed just last year. A swirl of emotions engulfed her. Rage, jealousy, despair. She stalked the woman's profile, devouring every snippet of personal information like a ravenous beast. Sarah Thompson, 29, project manager at a tech firm. Dozens more photos depicted the smiling couple's daily outings, meals together, weekends away. They made no attempt to hide their blatant affection from prying eyes. Diana threw her phone across the room with a scream of anguish. Still, the happy images seared her mind like a brand, taunting her failure to keep Tom. She replayed their final argument on repeat, fixating on her perceived shortcomings. How did she lose control so completely? In the dark hours before dawn, an insidious thought took hold. What if she took back the power? Diana retrieved her phone undamaged and flicked through past conversations, stopping on reminders of past mistakes. Late nights spent hacking into ex's email accounts. Seeking payback now seemed tame. This time, her rage demanded a far more visceral solution. She typed "deal with problem" discreetly into her search engine and anxiously scanned the results. Leads on the ClearNet offered no real solution to her thirst for vengeance. Then, a link appeared for an ominous hidden service with anonymous contacts. Her heart pounded as she accessed the darknet site, which promised discretion for those disinclined to legal recourse. Names and photos of targets populated the pages like victims in a serial killer's scrapbook. A message board allowed clients to describe desired solutions, with Bitcoin payment required upfront. Diana knew crossing this line meant true danger. Still, her pain demanded an outlet. After several glasses of wine, she submitted Tom and Sarah's profiles with brief but brutal instructions. The deed was done, and Diana sat shaking in the dark, wondering if a door had closed or opened to an even deeper hell. Diana awoke with a splitting headache and a gnawing sense of dread in her gut. The events of the previous night emerged from the fog like a nightmare. She scrambled for her phone with trembling hands, opening the ominous site with fear and grim determination. A new message waited in her inbox from an anonymous contact. "I can take care of your problem for 2 Bitcoin, paid upfront." Diana didn't have that kind of money to spend recklessly. Yet the offer stirred her vengeful compulsions. She replied, requesting a payment plan and providing sensitive details about Sarah's daily routine. The contact agreed to 3 weekly installments, the final on completion of the job. Diana made the first transaction shakily, trying to ignore the reality of putting a price on another person's well-being. Her fear battled a dark satisfaction that the wheels were in motion after months of powerlessness. This newfound control was intoxicating, no matter the cost. Across town, Special Agent Ryan pored over a thick case file at his desk. A fresh lead from the FBI's monitoring of the dark website demanded his attention. He opened Diana's messages in disguise, slowly peeling back layers of her psychology. Beneath the rage lay vestiges of heartbreak and perhaps mental instability. Ryan posed as the contact, entering a carefully crafted dialogue to gain Diana's trust while stalling real violence. His role required a balance of empathy and authority to uncover the truth gently. If Diana's intentions proved severely dangerous, legal intervention would become crucial to prevent harm. For now, Ryan's priority centered on ensuring no one faced real danger from Diana's actions. He meticulously traced her digital fingerprints back to a name, address, and personal history now unfolding before him on his screen. Diana Stinson, 31, had filed 3 police reports against ex-partners in the past decade for domestic violence and harassment. A troubled past weighed heavily on her present choices. Another message from Diana popped up, impatiently requesting confirmation the job had started. Ryan stalled further with excuses while his colleagues searched for legal cause to act. He assured Diana her payments were received and preparations were underway, hoping to sustain her twisted faith in the scheme a while longer. Each response dragged him deeper into her psyche, a journey that could end behind bars if her full intentions proved too dark to ignore. Meanwhile, Diana sank further into her dangerous fantasies, blinded to reality by wrath and her growing dependence on shattering all ties to the life that betrayed her. The blurred lines were vanishing, and escape seemed further each hour she spent in the depths of her madness and the dark net's insidious embrace. As the days passed, Diana found herself craving the anonymous contact's messages like a drug. Agent Ryan played the role to perfection, delivering ominous warnings about secrecy disguising words of comfort. He urged patience, claiming the hired man preferred to study targets closely before acting to minimize risks. Diana clung to his lies, desperate to prolong her fantasies of retribution. She cut contact with friends and family, isolating fully in an online world where she held the reins of power. Only the contact offered understanding of her ordeal, not judgment for her methods of coping. In their late-night chats, Ryan led Diana to reveal ever more disturbing truths. Details emerged of Tom's emotional and at times physical abuse, slowly stripping away her sense of self. The polite mask slipped occasionally, as Diana confessed violent urges matching those she paid another to fulfill. Ryan grew more concerned with each conversation, augmenting his understanding of the dangerous break with reality she experienced. Her grip on the division between fantasy and action disintegrated amid isolation and past trauma. Legal intervention must be carefully planned to avoid exacerbating her mental state. Meanwhile, Diana waited impatiently for news of the hired man completing his task, craving the return of her lost power. In her twisted mind, eliminating Sarah equaled erasing the proof of her powerlessness before meeting the sympathetic contact. His promises of discretion became a noose tightening with each exchanged Bitcoin as she severed all bonds to reality. One night, a message from the contact sent chills through her. My friend has reported observing the target's residence for weaknesses. All preparations are on track for the appointed time. Are you certain you wish to see this through? Diana hesitated, grasping for the familiar thrill of vengeance. But phantom flashes of past attacks now mingled with violent imaginings, fracturing whatever hold-on sanity she retained. Still, backing out meant facing her failure alone again. With a shuddering breath, she replied, "Tell him to proceed as discussed. I want this over with." The die was cast, yet clarity seemed to slip further from her frantic grip with each passing hour. A cold sense of dread gripped Diana's heart as she pulled up to the rendezvous point for her final exchange. The sidewalk outside a dimly lit laundromat seemed too public a location for the deed she paid to see done. Yet her anonymous contact had been clear. He required her presence to close their arrangement and hand over the remaining payment. She sent a message requesting confirmation. Stomach churning, the response filled her with uncertain relief. The job was complete. No harm had befallen the hired man. Now her duty was a simple showing of good faith before severing ties for good. Steeling her frayed nerves, Diana exited the vehicle and scanned the area for familiar faces. A black BMW crept up and parked at the curb. Her contact emerged from the driver's seat alone, a nondescript man in dark clothes. "Let's conclude our business quickly," he said brusquely, gesturing for her to follow. Diana complied shakily, too terrified to consider how badly things had spiraled. She never saw the other cars quietly surrounding them until it was too late. As the man turned with raised arms, A masked tactical team wielding assault rifles descended upon the scene. Diana gasped in horror, too muffled by the hand, now gripping her mouth, dragged her to the pavement. Cold steel clicked tight around her wrists. Through the chaos, Agent Ryan emerged, exposing his true identity as FBI. He recited Diana's rights while paramedics checked her shock. Her hazy mind refused to comprehend how the trusted confidant was a trap carefully set to illuminate homely truths. All the while, phantom images flashed, of violence plotted, money paid to end another life in a twisted quest for wholeness. Darker still lurked visions of failure yet again to control her destiny. Only as the handcuffs cut into her skin did reality strike with full, crushing force. Diana's sobs echoed against the laundromat's glass, mourning shattered illusions, and a future that would now be decided not by her, but the justice she embraced in madness. Fluorescent lights seared Diana's vision as she awoke in an interrogation room. Agent Ryan sat across the metal table, setting down a cup of vending machine coffee. He reviewed the evidence gathered through their talks. Payments to harm another, graphic messages requesting violence. Yet beneath the legalities lay a deeper tragedy. Diana saw only failure. All her desperate bids for control ended in the same pathetic place, powerless and trapped by forces beyond comprehending. Memories from past assaults resurfaced, fragmenting the present into shards of terror. Her rationale dissolved under an onslaught of memories. Ryan spoke gently but firmly, pulling her back from the edge with a calm authority learned from years of difficult interviews. Her mental state provided context, not absolution for serious criminal plans enacted. Help was available if she chose recovery over further misguided attempts at empowerment through harming others. The offer gave Diana pause amid her internal tempest. All she wanted was the dignity and safety stripped away so many times before. Therapy and medication at least offered a lifeline if she accepted hitting rock bottom. Her will dissolved into exhausted acquiescence. 6 months later, Diana sat in group therapy, recounting dark times that led her to the brink. Support from others with shared struggles gave solace that had long eluded her. In solitary visiting areas, Agent Ryan checked her progress with empathy, born of past successes and failures, in guiding lost souls towards light. Out the window, sunshine hinted at clarity gradually emerging even from deepest personal shadows and societal blurs, enabling harm, with continued effort navigating trauma's grip. Diana glimpsed a future not defined by others' actions. Her journey was long, yet walking towards health alongside those who pulled her from an abyss of her own making. A morning after the night finally seemed possible. Sam Anderson stared absently at his computer screen, the empty document mocking his inability to focus. For weeks, no matter how hard he tried to concentrate on his work, his mind remained clouded in a dense fog. He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his eyes, hoping the physical sensation might help clear his scrambled thoughts. It was hardly surprising given how little sleep he'd been getting lately. His insomniac nights were filled with formless anxieties that kept him hovering right on the edge of wakefulness. A chime from his phone startled him back to full alertness. His heart raced as he snatched it up, half expecting to see some dire warning or calamity in his notifications. But it was just an advertisement. Curious, he opened the bizarre message. In vivid animated letters, it advertised an unlisted virtual psychological experience like no other. Skeptical yet intrigued, he tapped the cryptic web address for more information. It led him to a dark page with a minimalist black and red interface. The experience was called Nightmare Realm, promising to take players to the depths of human fears and madness. Something about its enigmatic tone called out to Sam like a siren song in his fragile mental state. He clicked download without a second thought, willing to try anything that might jolt him from his recent lassitude into some semblance of sensation again. As the encrypted files installed, he found himself both eager and apprehensive about what Nightmare Realm might bring. Once activated, the immersive VR world transported Sam to a dense, misty forest beneath an ominous blood-red moon. An eerie silence enveloped him as he turned in a circle, taking in the gnarled dead trees silhouetted against the glowing sky. A twig snapped in the distance, making him jump. He watched warily as strange shadows seemed to flit between the trunks. Then, suddenly, a blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness like shattered glass. Heart pounding, Sam whooped around, searching for the source. Nothing but thick fog in every direction. His panicked breaths billowed in white clouds before him as he backed slowly away. The world began to tilt and blur at the edges of his vision. When he came to, Sam found himself lying on the damp forest floor, disoriented. His virtual hand rose shakily to probe the back of his head, half expecting to feel sticky warmth, but there was nothing. He stood on unsteady legs, peering into the obscuring fog as shrieks and cries still echoed eerily in the distance. A creeping sense of unease lingered long after he removed the VR headset, but he couldn't deny the visceral rush Nightmare Realm provided, catapulting him from his numb mental fugue into pulse, pounding terror and adrenaline. For the first time in weeks, he felt truly alive again. As darkness fell outside his apartment windows, Sam found himself craving another dose, wondering what new nightmares might await in the virtual realm's depths. The screech of his alarm jerked Sam from a fitful sleep. His sheets were soaked through with sweat, remnants of the nightmare still clinging like cobwebs in his mind. The previous night in Nightmare Realm had left him more shaken than before. Though sunlight streamed into his bedroom, an ominous shadow lingered at the edges of his consciousness. At work, Sam struggled to focus through his mounting exhaustion and anxiety. When his colleague Sophie asked if he was feeling all right, he deflected with a vague excuse about poor rest. As evening fell once more, Sam felt a pulsing compulsion drawing him back into the VR simulation. He immersed himself without hesitation, eager for the reprieve of sensations, even terrifying ones, over his debilitating mental fog. The dense forest greeted him as before, only now a thick clotted mist obscured even nearby trees. Sam breathed slowly, listening for any sign of movement as he scanned the swirling vapors. A chill ran through him as disembodied voices whispered all around, their words lost in the mist. Then suddenly a blood-curdling scream rent the air. Much closer this time, Sam stumbled in its direction, drawn by morbid curiosity and mounting panic. Bursting into a clearing, he froze in horror. A hooded figure in tattered rags stood over a writhing virtual body on the ground, its face obscured by long, stringy hair. As Sam watched, paralyzed, it slowly turned its featureless head towards him with an unnatural jerk. He tore off the VR headset with a lurching gasp, finding himself alone in his dark apartment once more. His sweat-soaked clothing clung to his trembling form as reality and simulation blended in his fractured mind. The next few nights passed in a blurred delirium for Sam, as Nightmare Realm's horrors consumed his every waking thought. Each new gruesome scenario chipped away at the rigid boundaries between real and virtual, until nothing made sense anymore. His colleagues grew alarmed by Sam's increasingly erratic behavior and hollow gaze. After he nodded off into disturbing REM sleep at his desk, Sophie determined an intervention was needed. She drove him home, insisting he take medical leave to recover. But Sam dismissed their worries as he was gripped by compulsion. Nothing else mattered but delving deeper into Nightmare Realm's mysteries each night, no matter the toll on his sanity. Its terrors had become an addiction that he couldn't live without, even as it slowly ate him alive. One morning, Sam's neighbor Gary failed to answer their knock. When maintenance let themselves in, they found no signs of struggle, just an open window, and Gary vanished without a trace like others from the building. Seeking distraction from her own fears, Sophie visited Sam, only to find his front door left ajar. Inside, the apartment was empty, but for his VR headset, blinking ominously on the floor, still logged into Nightmare Realm's opening screens. Panicked, Sophie raced to Sam's workplace and confronted his supervisor about his worrisome actions. Together, they logged into his computer, finding frantic searches on the dark web related to Nightmare Realm. His browser history revealed the experience had an active message board full of unhinged ramblings. Many users spoke of auditory and visual hallucinations, plaguing them after long sessions. Some even claimed the game's developer had contacted them directly with cryptic warnings. That night, drawn by obsession and the need for answers, Sam dove back into Nightmare Realm alone. The familiar haunted wood materialized around him, though now its appearance had shifted subtly into something more unnatural and disturbing. Sam crept along twisted paths, hunting for clues, carefully scanning his surroundings. Pale faces seemed to materialize briefly in the gaps between gnarled trunks, leaving him doubting his own perceptions. The screams had ceased, leaving an eerie absolute silence pressing in from all sides. A snapped branch suddenly sent him spinning, coming face to face with an ominously robed figure. Its emaciated form towered over him, flesh hanging limply from exposed bones. Two pits of darkness stared down from where its eyes should be, as ragged breaths rattled in its sunken chest cavity. Paralyzed by terror, Sam could only watch as a twisted grin split its jawless face. It lunged with lightning speed, slamming him against a tree with disturbing force. His breath rushed from his lungs, though no physical impact occurred in reality. As the apparition leaned in to whisper some indecipherable message, Sam noticed strange symbols etched into the bark behind his head. With supreme effort, he wrenched free and took a photo on his headset for future reference before fleeing into the misty shadows. Back in his apartment, Sam pored over his discovery, a disturbing occult symbol he recognized from his dark web research. It represented the summoning of maleficent spirits and crossed all known demonic lore. His hands trembled as dreadful implications set in. Nightmare Realm was no mere simulation, but a conduit for unfathomable sinister entities manipulating those who played too deeply, and Sam had foolishly given them dominion over his mind through chronic exposure. His tenuous grip on reality hung by a thread as paranormal forces invaded his psyche. Only by unraveling the dark purpose behind Nightmare Realm could he hope to save himself, and those already lost. But first, Sam knew he must expose the unknown architects weaving their malign digital spell before their powers grew too strong to overcome. Alone in his shadowy apartment, Sam assembled clues about Nightmare Realm's reclusive developer, known only as Mephistopheles. Scouring the dark corners of the web, he unearthed sparse details about the enigmatic figure. Accounts described Mephistopheles as an elusive entity, lurking the peripheries of the occult underground. Some proclaimed them the first to breach the veil between virtual and realms through dark manipulations of technology. Sam struggled to focus through his worsening state of mental and physical depletion. Snatches of half-remembered nightmares still plagued his fractured mind. He knew exposing Mephistopheles' sinister agenda was his only hope for salvation. Armed with his discoveries, Sam confronted authorities and news outlets, pleading with them to investigate Nightmare Realm's connection to the disappearances. But without evidence, they dismissed his paranoid claims, exacerbating his perilous unraveling. That night, Sam turned to the game's message boards in a last desperate gambit. To his horror, multiple users had recently gone dark, their accounts deleted without explanation. Others raved in unhinged whispers of unspeakable acts committed in the game's depths. A new direct message from an anonymous account sent Sam into a panic. Its cryptic words warned that Mephistopheles had deemed him an enemy, and forces were already mobilizing to eliminate the threat. Sam scrambled to trace the sender's digital footprints. It led him on a frantic online chase through twisted corridors of the deep web. With each jarring revelation, Sam's cognitive barriers splintered further under the strain. His physical form weakened as his psyche battled metaphysical incursions. After hours trapped navigating Mephistopheles' complex labyrinth, Sam sensed their digital lair materializing into view. An encoded set of coordinates then appeared, beckoning him to a real-world location for a final confrontation. Exhausted yet driven by desperation, Sam raced to the remote abandoned warehouse under cover of nightfall. As shadows played on crumpling walls, he steeled himself to uncover the nexus where Nightmare Realm's terrorists plotted their digitally augmented atrocities against humanity. From the enveloping dark, Sam knew unseen eyes watched his every move, toying with their cornered prey before the impending kill. He gripped the VR headset tightly, preparing to face whatever unnameable forces lurked within its virtual prison, and shatter them once and for all through whatever means necessary. Sam slunk through the dilapidated warehouse, senses on high alert. His VR headset grasped tight like a talisman against the nameless terror stalking his footsteps. Broken windows gaped like mouths filled with shattered teeth, as if the building itself hid some gnashing secret within. A faint electronic pulse drew Sam onward into the innermost chamber. There, a lone figure stood bent over an array of esoteric occult tech, cloaked in long robes. "Mephistopheles, I presume?" Sam called out shakily. The figure turned with a hooded grin, long, spindly limbs emerging from billowing fabric. "So you found me at last, poor broken soul, come to demand answers, or seek release from your torment." "Enough games," snapped Sam. "What evil have you unleashed through Nightmare Realm? How do I stop your depravities?" Mephistopheles cackled, a grating sound like steel on steel. "Foolish mortal, my work is but a thread in lands far darker than your feeble mind can fathom. Through tech and ritual, I've ripped windows between worlds that can never be closed." Sam steeled himself against the malignant presence, recalling his research. "You're just summoning vestiges through Vor's psychic channeling, but I know a way to break the bindings and banish your puppets back to the nether realms." Rage simmered behind Mephistopheles' dead eyes at Sam's defiance. Cryptic mutterings spilled from beneath the hood as clawed hands scrambled across blinking circuits. The warehouse plummeted into seizure, inducing strobe lights and a bone rattling frequency pulse. Through the discordant din, Sam scrolled frantically through Nightmare Realm's virtual interface on his headset, decoding arcane firewalls. With a cry of anguish and triumph, he located the entity's anchors and input commands to sever their tethers to the human plane. The technologic cacophony suddenly cut out. In its place, an abhuman howl split the air as Mephistopheles staggered backward. Its robe fell empty to the floor to reveal only swirling shadows dissipating into nothingness. Sam slumped in euphoric exhaustion, gripping reality once more. Through his victory, missing victims would find closure while future prey were spared. As for Mephistopheles and their ilk, he took comfort knowing their power relied on humanity's willingness to submit to fear and madness. Years later, having sought healing, Sam stands in a meadow bathed in warm sunlight. He smiles at passers-by, oblivious to the unseen dimensions and the battles waged to shield them from corruption. Though shadows linger at the edge of perception, Sam chooses to walk always toward the light. I rubbed my eyes and checked the clock. 2:00 a.m. stared back at me in luminescent green. Another late night poring over case files, and the smallest of breaks had gotten away from me. I gathered my papers and switched off the desk lamp, locking up for the night and heading down to the car park. My phone buzzed as I started the engine. A text from Amelia. "New lead on dark web case. Urgent. Meet me at office." I sighed and reversed out of the spot, flipping the siren on to clear traffic. What now? We'd been chasing our tails for weeks on this one. 20 minutes later, I was striding through the front doors again. Amelia waved me over, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in hand. "What is it?" I asked, accepting one gratefully. "We've had a breakthrough. Interpol forwarded intel from Cambodia. They found images from multiple secure sites geolocating back to the UK. I rubbed my eyes again. More of the same depraved material we'd been seeing, just from a new undisclosed location in our borders. Then Amelia dropped the real bomb. Some of the images, they feature recognizable backdrops. Orphanages in Phnom Penh. One image clearly shows a school sign, an English one. My stomach churned. We weren't dealing with faceless perverts abroad. This cut much closer to home, and targeting orphan children, the most vulnerable of victims. A cold anger grew in my chest. Get the text analyzing the metadata. I want locations, names, anything we can use. Amelia nodded, already on it. But there's one more thing. We may have an identity. One of the orphanage directors recognized an individual in some of the photos. British man called Kevin Smith volunteered at their facility a few years ago. She handed me a picture. I stared at eyes that seemed kind, yet hid dark depravity behind them. Crew-cut hair framed boyish features, an easy smile. The photo could have graced a charity brochure, but this man posed a far more insidious threat. I swallowed back bile. Get me everything we have on Kevin Smith. It's time we paid him a visit. The next morning dawned with a lead thick enough to act on. My team assembled around the board as I laid out a profile of Smith. Mid-30s, no criminal record, worked variously as a youth football coach and teacher. Seemed the very picture of upstanding citizenry. But appearances could deceive, as his secret actions in Cambodia suggested. We would be watching keenly as the investigation progressed. For now, stealth was key. We didn't want to tip our hand before gathering stronger proof. I assigned traces on Smith's digital and financial records, surveillance of his home. Then I turned to Amelia. Let's go have chat with Mr. Smith. The game was afoot. Our surveillance van sat idling at the end of the street as Smith exited his front door, briefcase in hand. I nodded to Amelia and we stepped out, casually making our way over. "Mr. Smith," I called as we approached. He turned, eyes widening at the sight of us. "Can I help you, officers?" Politeness couldn't hide the unease in his tone. I flashed my badge. "We'd like a word, if you've got a minute. We're investigating criminal activity and you may be able to assist us." Smith glanced nervously around the quiet cul-de-sac. "Of course, how can I help?" We followed him inside, declining offers of tea as I took in the neatly furnished home. Photos on the mantel showed a smiling family. His charity work in Cambodia, also proudly displayed, also convincing. I got straight to the point. "We're investigating the distribution of indecent images of minors on the dark web. Some metadata traces back here to the UK. You spent time in Cambodia. Is there anyone from those trips who might bear a grudge?" His guarded expression changed to one of concern. "That's terrible." "No, all my volunteer work was above board." Amelia spoke up. "We have reason to believe you may know more than you're letting on, Mr. Smith. It's in your best interest to be fully truthful now." A sheen of sweat broke out across his forehead. His eyes darted at the doors and windows, calculating. Then a tight smile. "I'm afraid I can't help you, officer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a class to teach." He stepped forward meaningfully. I didn't budge. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Smith. Best not to do anything foolish in the meantime." He gripped the door handle hard. Nostrils flared, but said nothing more as we let ourselves out. Amelia and I exchanged a look. Smith would bear close watching. Back at the office, I threw myself into expanding our knowledge of the suspect. Financial records showed no anomalies. Digital breadcrumbs led nowhere useful yet, but his orphanage trips had turned up new questions. I put in a call to Interpol Cambodia and was soon speaking to an agent there. "Smith, you say?" "Yes. He volunteered regularly at one of the largest facilities here, very well regarded. Her tone changed, though there was an incident a few years back now. Allegations of inappropriate behavior with a teenage boy. Nothing that stuck, but he was asked not to return. My pulse quickened. Finally, a chink in the facade. Get me all records you have on that investigation. And let me know if any children from that orphanage went missing around that time. The thread was growing thinner, but with careful pulling, it might yet unravel to reveal the extent of Smith's crimes. The hunt was on. Rummaging through case files late one night, a single line caught my eye. Request for search warrant denied due to lack of evidence. I sat back, mind racing. If we could demonstrate stronger cause for suspicion, get a judge to authorize access to Smith's digital devices and home, we might crack this wide open. The orphanage incident report had proven inconclusive but raised questions. 2 days later, Interpol's response provided the linchpin. A teenage boy from that same orphanage had gone missing without a trace a month after Smith's sudden departure. It wasn't proof, but it was enough. We pored over maps charting Smith's movements abroad and here. Cross, referencing times and locations of disappearing children with his documented travels. The pattern wasn't definite, but it was damning. Open your laptop, I instructed Amelia as I peered over her shoulder. Let's see what else this tells us. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, running metadata, scraping scripts, deciphering timestamps and IP addresses buried in seized images. She paused. Take a look at this, Tom. 5 images originate from the same dark web profile, and all geolocate to, I leaned in, Smith's home address. My pulse spiked. We had tied his digital activity directly to criminal acts on UK soil. I stood abruptly. Get Judge McKinley on the phone. Tell him it's urgent. Within the hour, we had warrants in hand and were mobilizing a raid for dusk. Adrenaline surged as our convoy raced over, tactical gear rustling. We burst through the front door, guns raised, ordering Smith to his knees. His pale, shaking form complied without a sound as we searched methodically. Under the floorboards in his study, we found a hollowed-out book and a flash drive stuffed with more depraved images than I could bear to see. Smith started weeping as the cuffs clicked shut. Please, you don't understand. I can't explain. But I had seen enough. Take him away, I told the uniforms grimly. In the annals of my career, this case would rank among the darkest. Yet, in apprehending our prime suspect, perhaps some small light had been brought. Justice was coming. It remained to be seen how much. I took a steadying breath before entering the interrogation room. Smith sat slumped, shoulders shaking periodically. No more masks now. His true nature was bared for me to confront. The door clicked shut heavily behind me. Smith looked up, eyes red, rimmed, and pleading. Agent Wilson, please, you have to believe me. I never hurt anyone. It was all online roleplay, I swear. His facade of innocence had well and truly fractured under the weight of our evidence. I clasped my hands on the table, leaning in. We both know that's a lie, Kevin. You assaulted a boy in Cambodia, made abused images of orphaned children, and God knows how many more of your sick fantasies you acted on before we caught up to you. My voice remained calm yet harsh. I would not coddle a predator. He shook his head violently. No, it wasn't real. They wanted it. They all said so. Please, just let me go home to my family. They don't understand like you do. I recoiled in disgust. He still thought to manipulate me, persuade me of his twisted justifications even now. Enough. This interview is over until you're ready to confess your crimes in full. I pushed away, striding for the door when Smith slammed his fists down with a guttural yell. Turn around. Let me see the anger, the hatred in your eyes. Admit you want to hurt me like I hurt them. My hands clenched, every instinct screaming to wrap them around his scrawny neck. But that road led to darkness, and my duty was to justice, not vengeance. With tremendous effort, I reined in my fury and fixed him with a cold stare. The only one who'll be hurting you from now on is a judge and jury of your peers. Goodbye, Mr. Smith. Our battle is primarily against evil rather than persons. We seek to defeat wrongdoing, not people. Back in my office, I turned Dr. King's quote over in my mind, finding solace in its wisdom. Smith would get his due in a court of law. And I had a case to build. Justice was coming. The courtroom was packed as Smith was led inside, scanning the gallery with what might pass for defiance. I gave a curt nod to Amelia and the prosecution team before taking my seat, every piece of evidence at the ready. The opening statements laid it all out plainly. How Smith groomed vulnerable children abroad under guise of charity, used orphanage access to fuel his depraved appetites. How his double life led straight back to production and sharing of abusive materials. How our digital forensics traced it all incontrovertibly to him. Over 3 days, witness after brave witness recounted Smith's manipulated kindnesses that hid darker intentions. The medical examiner detailed scars some victims would carry forever. Interpol agents walked through their investigation and our cooperation across borders. And Amelia guided the jury clinically through screens of evidence we'd unearthed. As Smith took the stand, his mask broke completely. Spittle flew as he ranted about conspiracies and entrapment, how we were all out to get him. But the jury saw through it. I could tell. In her closing argument, the prosecutor seared the truth home. This man is a monster who inflicted untold suffering. Now it is time for justice. The jury filed out. An hour later, they returned. Guilty on all counts. Gasps and sobs rang through the room as Smith was led away yelling obscenities. He would not see light again for many years. Time rather than balm for the wounds he caused. After, I met privately with one young man who testified. "Thank you for not giving up on us," he said through tears. In that moment, all the darkness receded, replaced by warmth of lives healed and protected going forward. My work was ending, but its purpose remained.